Wake up and deliver!
Ooh, we are live now. Good morning, John.
Good morning. What's going on today?
We're just waking up and ready to deliver. So wake up and deliver, as we always do.
Yeah, there you go.
And then we have our favorite person in the world always joining us. Like, I bet you she was never late for class either. Kat is always here listening first. It's a good day when she joins us. If she wasn't here, I think I'd fumble. I'd be like, "What's going on? What are we gonna do now?" All right, we're gonna get going as we usually do. Start off with some morning brain coffee, as I call it. This one today is, as always, I always say it's interesting because they're always interesting to me. Courage is knowing it might hurt and doing it anyway. Stupidity is the same, and that's why life is hard.
Oh, that's a good
I'll
one.
let that kind of sink in for a
That-
second as I take a sip of my coffee.
That sounds like something else though. I have a feeling that there's something else that's got kind of that similar frame. I'll have to think about it, but I it felt familiar.
It's a Jeremy Goldberg.
Yeah, no, I think he twisted it for sure. Like I just have a feeling it's based off something else. That might be a question for G. Be like, hey, I think there's another quote close like this. What is it?
Answer all my problems and questions. So, John, you and I have had, actually, maybe we'll go back, maybe we'll get as lively as we did. You and I had a call with Jason Crown earlier this week, and Rita, his
Yeah.
assistant or whatever. And you and I got really, really lively on the call. Like, we were arguing. I was like, we should probably do this more on Monday. So I brought
Yeah.
up the questions that she was asking us, but maybe we will give a little bit of context of what we were arguing about, or what we were kind of debating through.
Debating. You can't say arguing. Everyone thinks it's negative that way.
It was negative. I was very much appalled by what you said.
Okay, then I guess we were arguing. That's fine.
So some of the questions, I don't know, I'll read them out because I know you probably didn't have them open. And I forget which one we started really kind of getting into the in-depth on, but Amazon, and you did a post this morning about Amazon as well, has become synonymous with quick deliveries. And how has this affected customer expectations in the final mile and the LTL market? And I like the focus on the LTL. We talk about the final mile a lot, so I like the LTL focus of this question when we talked about it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, did you want to give your piece? You gave a really, I think the reason why we started to get passionate, you gave a really like long and thought out answer, and I gave like a 2-word answer.
Remind me, I didn't think mine was that long and thought out. I was kind of just, I think, talking about
Well,
what.
you felt that like, you really, especially connected to LTL, we were like, oh, well, Amazon's not really into like LTL. It's not really what they do. They don't really set expectations, all of these things. I basically came back and said, anything Amazon does sets expectations because it just influences people, and then the people in their personal lives come back to their professional lives. So I said, even though they're not in LTL per se, the concept of like what someone can get in their personal life, like if you can order a Bic pen for like $5 and get it the next day or same day in some of the US markets, like for sure that kind of frame gets applied to other areas of their life, especially when they work in transportation or delivery, because they're like, well, if Amazon can do this, you should be able to do Y. You know what I mean? And they don't accept maybe the same types of frameworks.
If Amazon can deliver a pen to your house the next day, why can't I deliver a whole bunch of LTL to my customer next day? Was the argument that we were
Yeah,
having?
well,
Is that
because
where-
because if you think about it, right, a lot of people make an immediate association with the amount that they spend, meaning that more should be able to happen. Like, so if I can deliver a $5 pen with all of those resources, and I'm delivering, a pallet worth $10,000, like, of course, you should be able to do what the person delivering $5 should do.
the activity should be the exact same, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying I agree with that logic. I'm saying a lot of people infer the value of the shipment, or the quality of what they're shipping or something like that, as having an influencer on how it moves.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I disagreed with you on that one. I think I just gave more context of I don't think Amazon's setting the pace on that quick deliveries. But now that you kind of explain it and work it through here in this context, I think it makes a little bit more sense than the activities everybody expects it the same between their personal lives and their professional lives. But then she went into another question, which was how will it change the market in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see LTL going with new expectations will customers have? And I think you kind of touched upon that. I think customers are going to expect it quicker, and everything that supply chain is getting shorter and shorter. But it's also going to create a lot of different havoc. Like any disruption in the supply chain on that front, there's going to be a cascading effect far worse when everybody expects it the next day. It's not going to have any room for error, for inventory, or for anything. And I thought that was an interesting conversation we were having as well, especially around that white glove service too, because we were trying to talk about what does white glove LTL service look, and we kind of went into, well, in the future, everybody's going to be this next automated systems. White glove is going to be more personalized, more human touch, someone calling, someone talking to you, a person, versus it being automated like all these big companies are doing. And you're kind of like, I don't know, this person aspect of it, I don't think is gonna hold as well as you're making it out to seem, Matt.
I think the heavy, like, just the heavy. No. Well, I mean, I think that personalization in the really weak sense, like the way that people think that, like, oh, I have a list, and personalization means I can send an email with like your generated name at the top. That's what I don't think is going to hold. Where I think we differ, I felt though that even with relationships and even with like the level of connection that very often, white glove providers will have, right, and how they build their business on that sort of customer intimacy. I think I was just sharing that, like, it has to go to the next level and kind of blend the concept of like a 3PL, 4PL, even though I'm not suggesting just to be 4PL. But I think, as systems continue to evolve, as, data visibility, interchange, all of these things continue to get broader, if you're going to provide any kind of premium service, I think it's going to have to come with like a lot of extras. Like, I think you're going to see more people throwing in more things and having to do more, right? So it's like, what level of reporting do you do? How are you doing tracking? How are you integrating really specialized requirements and stuff like that? And not just being someone, for example, that can do a really, maybe just like a really great delivery, whether that's final mile, whether that's, sort of middle or first, right? Like really having a broader involvement in the customer's business is what I think the future of like white glove services is going to be more like. I think this is
where you and I started kind of having a little bit of the argument, because you're like, oh, the expectation was a 4PL to go down to more of a 3PL specialized. But then essentially I said, well, you're just describing a 3PL that is a 4PL, and adding that extra layer of data involvement into the customer system, and not just providing those good 3PL solutions.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like a weird space, like, where exactly do you blur the line, or where does that sit? But the reality is that, people are going to want partners. Like, if you're going to present yourself, in my opinion anyway, if you're going to present yourself as a premium service, if you're going to be that extra level versus someone that's just maybe very transactional and cost driven, I just think you're going to have to do more, right? And you're not going to be able to just keep lowering the price and keep providing higher levels of service. So, what more can you start to put into your package to offer more value to your customers? I think it looks more like 4PL style stuff, where there's a little bit more of a hands-on and involvement in their business for their benefit, as opposed to just being really a great, 3PL provider doing amazing at what you do only in your own world.
And we talked about that value last week when we had Nancy kind of jump on, and we kind of explored the different aspects of value, and the pricing and the costing of it. But now that everybody's kind of trying to, and I don't know if I agree, every news article right now is saying that the market has bottomed out. We're starting to see an increase.
Did you see Japan? Did you see Japan's stock market this morning?
No, I haven't not.
Oh,
seen the Japan.
Not pretty. Yeah, it's just like a straight line down.
Really?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's bottomed out. The other thing I've saw is like, Warren Buffett sold all his holdings on majority of things and now has bought obviously American bonds instead, and he's making about $1 billion a month off the bonds because the market is just going kaboomskis. I
Yeah,
don't know if
sorry.
it's bottomed out yet.
Well, just on that though. See, like I mean, Warren Buffett's like, obviously a super intelligent guy, but like, the types of things they can do. Those guys at Berkshire Hathaway or whatever are now sitting on something like 270 billion in cash.
More than the U.S. government.
Like literally, it's like, oh, just we have more money than we know what to do with. So I think that they would have to. Everyone should be a bit mindful about what they're doing because they have options that nobody has. Like, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
in terms of what they can do. But anyways, that's a little tangent. But you're right. Like the market. I think the point with that though is that the volatility in the market is all over the place, and you're seeing customers going up and down like crazy. Like as part of this, as everyone else is tanking, well, Lockheed took off. Like Lockheed stock went up. Like I don't know. It looked like it was almost 30%, like 25% or something like that. Because now everyone's getting super paranoid. They figure there's going to be all these issues in other parts of the world, and the U.S. is going to have to get involved. So now all of a sudden, defense contractors or defense manufacturers are like having their stock blow up. I mean, there's so much speculation. It's really, really difficult.
Oh,
But-
Robert's.
Robert, yeah,
He wants to jump
you
in.
want to jump in on our we're going to be careful, Robert. Say no, we're not going to get super political or anything. But hey, morning, how's it going?
Anybody else who wants to join, by all means, raise your hands, and more than happy to have you up.
It seems like the subject is not quite so close to what I'm developing, but I did just want to say I'm going to be in Denver August 25th through 28th or 9th, Monday through Thursday of that week, for a conference on transportation, energy, and the livable environment or something, sustainability. It's a transportation research board conference, and it's held in Denver because that's near the U.S. National Renewable Energy Lab. So it ought to be fun. I'll let you know.
Oh, that's good though. You know what? I do appreciate when everyone like shares different things because I think everyone knows about the like the big it's commerce based ones, right? You've got all of the manifests in the home delivery world and all of these other things, the post ones that people talk about. But it's always great to hear the ones that are focused a little bit more broadly on the industry and not necessarily just on showcasing specific vendors, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's gonna be a hot topic. Actually, funny enough that you say energy, because that's gonna be a hot topic for everybody for next little bit. Because as there's volatility in the market, energy is gonna be probably something that everybody's gonna be looking for, and it's gonna affect a lot of the manufacturing as people are kind of worried what's happening. It's definitely gonna be an interesting time period for the next couple months as we see what kind of flushes out in what's happening and overall for everybody.
Oh, yeah. PJM is the independent system operator, a large grid in the mid-Atlantic, Philadelphia, Maryland, New Jersey, and they just had their...
Do we lose you?
Yeah, I think we might have, Robert. We might have lost you. So we'll wait till he bounces back. But so that's a kind of interesting segue, though, if we think about it, because when markets get really volatile, and there's already been a lot of pressure in our industry, right? Like I mean, you look at the supply chain world in general, and you see all of the different elements within supply chain, but particularly, Matt, where you and I spend more time on the logistics side. What we're seeing are companies struggling, some companies failing. There's been a lot of like consolidation or M&A type activity, right? Last week, what kind of jumped up, and I was going to write about it, but I'm going to wait until after this week because they have their earnings call on like Wednesday or something like that. But Pitney Bowes selling off parts of their operation,
that was a
right?
good one. Yeah.
Right, so they're pushing stuff out. This morning, like or yesterday, whatever, Blue Yonder talking about acquiring One Networks for like, I don't know, $860 million or something like that to further bolster, their product and their offering. you're really starting to see a trend too, right? With everything from Shopify, which is at a merchant level and just a sales kind of focus, right? Right through everything in terms of getting things done for the customer, of this consolidation of activity. It's becoming very, very difficult to be like a one, like I'll call it, like not like a one-off, but like a provider of like one very small service or one small part of the value chain. It's getting to be much more difficult.
Well, these companies are they're struggling, even these big ones like Blue Yonder, to find the value. So the best way to find value when you're at that size is to start buying
For sure.
different companies, right? To start adding into it. That's why you're seeing so much consolidation and so much readjustment. Even like C.H. Robinson dropping all the people, firing all those people, focusing on developing their AI, but they're not getting the value back. It was, and what was in the article was, sorry, on the report was they needed to hit what the investors wanted. So that's why they had to get rid of a whole bunch of people. Not that they needed to, but they needed their books to look a lot better.
Yeah.
So they said, oh, the only way we can do this is we fire a whole bunch of people and maybe do X, Y, Z. But I don't think it's going to be a sustainable thing for them and a lot of different companies, because they're just trying to make the investors some money, but the market's not going to be able to hold it like we're seeing. It might be a different strategy you have to go forward on, and that consolidation part might not be the best angle right now.
Well, for certain companies, like you had it at the start, like when you're too big, like there's only so much you can do, right? Like the real way that you're gonna grow or at least grow faster is through like M&A. Apple kind of like, so Apple and Google, same kind of thing, right? That's why they buy everybody. But the only other thing that they have is to get into these industries that they've never been in before, which is why, education and healthcare is becoming a huge area of focus. UPS, Apple, Google, all of these guys want to get in on it. But funny enough, like two things I guess that you mentioned there. One was, you mentioned CH, and I wrote some stuff about CH and a little bit on their finances. I'm curious to get your take on that. But you can kind of see what happens, right, and the pressure from the shareholders. Like, so CH is making a move to kind of improve their, let's just call it like to better balance the books or to make it look more attractive or whatever. But you see what happens even to a company like Amazon with all the pedigree in the world and all of the market leading sort of technology and processes and people. Look at how bad they got their sort of head kicked in just because of the fact they had to announce like less than stellar results, and they're like the best of the best essentially. Like, I mean, they're one of the few companies in the world that should be able to get away with almost whatever reporting, and people shouldn't panic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they don't. They don't.
And they took a pretty good hit on it too. It wasn't like just a simple little slap. What was their drop? They dropped 15%.
Oh yeah, and for them, like, I mean, that's massive, right? Like, that would destroy other companies like that if that much value is lost out of some other company, right? But coming back to your point about CH, right? Like, you saw that did you see that Sankey kind of diagram that I had done up from their Q2 financials last week?
I most likely saw it. I just don't recall it. So maybe just kind of touch upon that.
Yeah. So I took all of their revenue and I showed, from the three different areas of activity that they have, right? Like the transportation, kind of all of their, their forwarding business, and then everything else. Take those three streams, show all of the revenue, which is about 4.4 billion, if I remember off the top of my head, and shows how it breaks down. And you can see even from like the 4.4 billion initial, like these guys are operating at 4% when you think of dead net revenue to final income, like 4%. Like, imagine managing $4.4 billion worth of transactions to walk away with income of like $178 million.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's what I think a lot of people don't really understand about the type of work that, like, the supply chain, but more so like even the logistics space is. And I think that that's why people, like, even when a Shopify that had all kinds of money, they couldn't make FSN work, because the thing is that, for the most part, most of what we do is fairly low margin, right? It's super challenging to coordinate all of that on a regular basis because it never stops. And then the worst is that it doesn't actually take much. Like, in a lot of businesses, to start tanking your results, you have to make some really bad decisions. In logistics, you just have to make some not great decisions and do it for long enough that it really starts to become problematic.
Do you think, and I didn't look into it, but you probably did, the Amazon report, did they show how much of what that spend was on their logistics and their logistics providing as a service and how much of revenue that was?
For Amazon?
Yeah.
No. So I didn't look up Amazon's financials, but we could do that after and take a look and see what's in there.
I was going to say, how curious to how, if it's in the negatives, and for how long would you think they would be able to sustain that negative before they realize it's a fool's errand on their part? They're not going to make money at that aspect, or are they just going to keep it in the negatives because it's something they need to push forward on, and realize that maybe that's as part of their service that they're providing globally to keep their products on their shelves.
Yeah, Amazon's interesting. When I really did a bigger look into their finances a little while ago, like they're interesting because I think that they're not negative, or they don't usually absorb any type of operating loss unless their capex or their like sort of facility spend, like unless their infrastructure spend goes really up, which is why, kind of as COVID tailed off and we got out of it, they really started to scale back like the number of warehouses they had and then getting rid of some of them. Because I think that's where they kind of get killed, so to speak, is when they're really in that high gear, like build and create kind of on the infrastructure side. I don't think they operated any operating loss when they're kind of balanced off, like, you know what I mean, and they're not expanding or building. But worth double checking.
A lot of these companies are getting, like we talked about FedEx before, all these, and UPS, and a lot of these companies are getting rid of those heavy capex positions that they were not having great results on. Even Transforce was recently saying, "Hey, we got to really look into our LTL sector because it's pretty fat. We're not making not pretty fat. It's pretty thin. We're not really making the money we're supposed to be making. We need to evaluate where we're spending our money and how we're making the return on it." Because it doesn't make sense like it did before, where a lot of these companies got into LTL or really focused on LTL or final mile during COVID. But now, like you and I have talked about, they're finding that it's not the same return as they thought it was going to be, because everybody expects it to be part of that service, and it's going to become a challenging piece where now everybody's addicted to it. They want that next day delivery, but I don't know if a lot of companies are going to make money at it, so I don't know how well they're going to fit into that frame. And you're seeing a lot of these startup companies, that's what they're, hey, we got the solution for the final mile, or we have the solution for the LTL, and we're going to provide these aggregates and find you the best price. But if you find these aggregates to find the best price for the LTL every single time, it's going to create a loss leader for a lot of those companies too, as everybody kind of jumps on that bottom rate price for that lane, and they don't want to see that saturation in that crappy lane too much either, right?
No, it's funny too, because for as much as like I like my tech and systems and toys, and like I love all of that, I find it insulting as shit to have someone that's never seen the back of a truck or like stepped on a dock to be like, oh yeah, well, clearly the only problem with your business is that you use spreadsheets. Like, I find that so wildly insulting that people, and they get away with it like crazy. Anyways, that's a tangent and a bit of a rant, a pet peeve, clearly. But data and information, and I think I've said this before, all of these systems, they'll take a good operator, like they can take someone who's good or really good and make them great potentially. But there's absolutely no tech on the planet at the moment that will take a shit operator and turn them into a hero like that. And everyone wants to believe that because they don't invest.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and they don't invest. And to your point about the CapEx spend, is that not the most dangerous slippery slope ever in logistics, where people are like, hey, we're thin, we're not making the margins, so we're going to push the CapEx, we're not going to do the investment, we'll wait till that next year to buy the warehouse, the truck, the repair, the roof, whatever it is. And then next year it comes and it's like, oh guys, we're still tight, we got to hit those big sales. It's a really dangerous slippery slope.
And then the service is not as great, so it becomes worse in that CapEx.
You lose sales, exactly.
And it becomes a thing. So it's not the easiest position to be in. So what are you thinking? Like, we're approaching, I know we're going to have a back to school kind of podcast with Jessica later this month, and we're approaching that fourth quarter kind of Black Friday, all those sales. What do you think is going to be the big challenge for a lot of companies? Will a lot of them make it to the fourth quarter, or would it be as revolutionary as they think? Because I think it's going to be quite soft this year. I don't think a lot of companies what they're expecting are going to hit it. No, and that CapEx we just talked about is going to be really a sinking anchor for a lot of them, that they're going to get surprised. They're not going to see that boom that they were expecting in that fourth quarter. And it's kind of like just tighten your belt, and if you can make yourself efficient, do so, but focus on what you're great at and not try to diversify at this point, is what I see coming out into the fourth quarter. What do you see?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I agree that I think people are going to be surprised. It wouldn't shock me if like 2025 started off on a very different foot, because everybody puts a lot of faith, faith and prayers, maybe even into into Q4, and you know, it's just not hitting the same, right? Like you're getting really much more drawn out periods. You're getting competition from, you know, other countries and from other sources, for example. And
supply
you know,
chain disruptions.
yeah, whether it's disruptions, whatever. But I mean, the thing is that, you know, people banking on like, oh, I'm going to hit my numbers here. It's tantamount to people being like, oh, my life is going to be perfect and I'll be all out of debt when I hit the lottery, so to speak. Because it's like what's happening. What's happening is that we have a really dangerous problem that's occurring kind of like in our market, in the sense that we want innovation and we want more products, and consumers seem to clamor for more choice or more this or more that. But the broader you make your product mix, and the more small suppliers and entrepreneurs, which I think is great. I love seeing all of the people doing disruptive things, like, you know, that. But the more you spread that out, it means that you're going to see an impact. Like I think I commented on someone's post yesterday about the fact that Best Buy, well, Best Buy is like they're tanking. And I think you and I both worked Future Shop, Best Buy, same kind of thing. And it's like, listen, I can tell you, even when I was there, shit, what was this now? Like, I'll just
15, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I was going to say like 20 years ago. It was already a very like cost-driven thing. They benefited a ton just from the fact that they had access to product. Like, you know, the computers were there, the TVs were there, that this was there. As that's really moved online, and they've had to just compete with people that don't have the same like sort of operating expense footprint, right? Or in the same way. Like they're struggling for sure. And I said right on that post, I can't even imagine these days what it takes for someone to actually go into a Best Buy and buy on value. Like everything that has to go through there in my mind is essentially like a transactional sale, which means that it's like unemotional, it's high price driven, it's just, you know, sort of like taking care of business. Like, you know what I mean? I'm coming to get something. And that's really the biggest value they have. They're going to struggle even more. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see them go through some really hard times, because if they can't figure out how to get away from transactional sales, they're going to get obliterated.
Well, I remember 20 years ago at Future Shop, they were having a challenge with the online sales, because the trend even back then was like everybody's just switching to online to purchase all of our products, and we can't compete that. And that price matching, everything was far more competitive, because back then everybody brought a newspaper in, and you know, they would at least talk to you about it, and you'd bundle your deal, you'd make that value sale like we talked about earlier. But now, like even for me, like I'll go on the Best Buy website just to buy something, because they have a little bit of a niche on certain products. But for the most part, it's the computer aspect. They've moved away from the computers like they used to, and now it's a whole bunch of different things, and and appliances, and the DVD sales are no longer there, which was a big drawing effect. The video game sales are no longer there because everything's online. So like, what's their niche that they have now? And it's hard to determine, right?
Exactly. And do you remember selling like Dynex USB cables? Like, no word of a lie, the amount of Dynex USB cables that I sold for $30 that literally had a cost of $4. And I mean, this is guys at the time where like they literally showed the cost of the product in the system, because they were wanting everyone to manage margins, and like selling that, or selling the warranty that was like 54% margin, or selling
batteries.
The Monster
Remember pushing
cables.
Batteries?
Yeah, all kinds of stuff, right? Which all of these things now that they used to float their business. Like I used to remember, like at one point when I was at Future Shop, I was doing over $1 million a year in sales, and I had a PSP attach rate of like almost 20%, right? So that was their extended warranty. So $1 million of sales, and I was hitting almost 20% attach rate. So again, you know, over about $200,000 or so of just pure profit for the company just on warranties, right, alone. And now these days, like, you know, you get up to the till at a Best Buy, and like they put the most lackluster effort into it, and being like, oh, do you want to buy the warranty? Like they don't even. They're already passing the screen before they finish the question, because they're getting no so much. So like all of these quote unquote added value things they used to do, like nobody's gonna buy a USB cable these days for $30. Like everybody on the planet is like, well, I'm gonna check Amazon first. And what's the first thing you see? Oh, 4-pack of USB cables for like $9.99.
Yeah, Amazon brand. But then
Well,
that kind of
whatever,
begs the question. That value piece that we were talking about, that was fantastic. Like it was great that we were always able to bundle and add it together. How does a company that, and not retailer, a company in logistics, final mile, LTL, FTL, warehousing, whatever along the supply chain, how does it add that value to a customer that it has a hard time even getting on the phone with and to showcasing it? And when a lot of customers are just going onto, the C.H. Robinson website, putting a rate in, and they got a rate, and that's what they're looking for. How do you bundle that value now with a customer? You can't even get them on the phone. What do you?
Yeah, that's super interesting because I would agree. I think the cold calling aspect's still really difficult. I think that's a lot of effort. I think there's a lot of trying to connect and whatever. I think I talked to you about this framework thing that I got exposed to as I was driving last week from. If you guys haven't heard, it was on the Diary of a CEO podcast by Stephen Bartlett, and he had on a guest that runs. I don't know, probably a little sensationalized, and I do think the guy's quasi-controversial, even from the way he opened and said, like, people think I'm full of shit. But he apparently was some CIA officer and stuff. At one point, very late in the podcast, they started talking about, like, influence or persuasion and stuff like that. And he's really just talking about, people have to see you, like they have to get used to you, and you have to get past that barrier of them wanting to avoid you, because it's like most people try to avoid all the new stuff these days first. Have to get past that. Then you have to get people willing to engage with you by talking or connecting with them on things that are of interest to them, that they have some kind of, they would be worth for them to invest their time, right, to give back to you a little bit. And then what was really interesting though, he said even if they don't really like you, they can start to trust you. And he got into this whole concept of falling into trust. So all of these things I shared with you last week, I was really captivated by. I was very curious about. So I got a few things there on my list to go through. But point being with all of that is that I think the easier and transactional sales are definitely harder and of less just general business value, right? I mean, they're price driven. They're just quick hits. They may or may not yield anything substantive or not. So you don't have a lot there. So when you're adding extra value, that's where I think it really has to become now more deeper understandings of saying what provides more to this particular customer, while also being paired with the fact that my business, whether it's a bulk transportation, LTL, final mile, warehousing, whatever, is intentionally choosing to then do things or engage in ways that take on more, I'll say responsibility. I don't know if that's the right word, but take on more responsibility for the brand and being like I'm not just a partner in the sense that I do my part. Be like, I'm actually going to try to help you really win. Like, you and I laughed. Like I was saying the laziest line in logistics right now is this concept coming out of warehouses where they're like, you focus on your sales and we'll ship your items. It's like, yeah, thanks. Like, you're going to print labels and stick them on boxes. Like, I get that there's a lot more to that, but I think people need more than that. Like, you know what I mean? It's just...
Okay, so let's be the last topic because we're a little bit over. And I want to know, from your experience, because you worked at, you were obviously what we call, as a service provider, a shipper.
A shipper, yeah, I wore the dirty label.
You were a shipper. You had freight and you needed to ship it, and I wanted it. What did you ever hear? What was the best kind of conversation that you had that was a value add for you? Besides, everybody moves point A to point B. Everybody says they do it effectively, efficiently, and at a great rate. Mm-hmm. What value can they bring to you? What kind of data or what kind of other solutions that they brought to the table that you were like, this makes sense for me. I do want to do business with them. How do you differentiate yourself? Because, back then when you were there, it wasn't as important. Back then it was less of an impact. But now it's like, if you don't have that extra oomph behind your conversation that you're talking to a customer, I don't think you're getting past that first conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there was two things probably right off the bat that would always stand out, or at minimum, I would say would completely disqualify people. So when you're thinking about more of the, let's call it local-ish freight, and I say things that were just essentially not long haul, big multi-day whatever, but anything that might be within some type of small rounder, city run, multi-drop, whatever. The business that I was in was the food business, so it was very it was like procedural, right? Like you had a lot of dock time appointments, you had a lot of expectations at stores. There was, you would have to manipulate product on the dock. You might have to bring it to a cooler. You'd have to do all this. So someone that talked to me about the fact that like, hey, we understand the food industry. We know what it's like working in these stores. Here's the type of things that we do, and here's what we do then to also, manage our costs, manage our time, manage our expectations. Like that would show me some type of understanding of the procedural aspect of it, and not just thinking like it was like a pin to pin or just like a pure drop, and leave, like you would do at a lot of warehouses. That was one thing that would stand out, or like I said, disqualify if the person came across the other way. The other thing on the longer haul side, right? Because we would make certain products like in the eastern part of the country, we'd ship them to the west. So something else that would really that started to stand out more towards the end of my time there, because it was what I was doing before I left. But like long haul transportation providers, where it's like, hey, so like what are the challenges? What are you seeing? Like we have lanes here, and because I was having a problem with my visibility a little bit, and I don't mean visibility just with like GPS tracking, because that is
we provide tracing and you can look it online.
Yeah,
John.
and that's
you can see it.
Yeah, but that's kind of trash. Like, hey, Mr. Customer, like just hit refresh 60 times a day. It's like, I don't want to do that. What I was looking for at the time, and I actually served this up on a platter to some of the biggest transportation providers in Canada, and they flat out told me no. I was shocked, because I was like, this is all you have to do, and I'm telling you, I can, like, you'll get a lot more from me. And they're like, nah, we're not doing that. I was like, you know what I need? I'm like, I want you on these 5 or 10 lanes. I need them specifically geofenced, and I need automated alerts and estimates based on when the truck enters the geofence and when it leaves this geofence. So the idea being is that if I was going from Toronto to Vancouver, it's like, that's great that like if it's a 9-day transit, that on day 8 you're like, oh buddy, just FYI, we're screwed. But that doesn't give me enough time to react. The reality was, you might have known when that was going through Winnipeg, or you might have known when that was going through Saskatchewan that you had a problem. I want to know then.
Yep.
And I don't want to know because I have to hit refresh and do the assumptions. Like, help me manage my red is essentially what I think the biggest value that people can do, because nobody gives a shit about looking at all the stuff that's green. Because that's what you expect to go through.
And they don't know how to read the data as well as you do, because you're used to that kind of aspect of it. They're just looking at it to make sure everything's all good, but they don't know if a truck is running a few hours behind or what's happening. Like, you got to do those calculations. And if you don't know how to do the calculation, because that's what your job is, you're the expert at it. And you might know, oh, the truck left out of Toronto and has to be in Vancouver for Monday morning on Friday at 6 p.m. He might not be there till about, 4 or 5 for 8 o'clock appointment. If there's a problem in BC, or there's high winds in Saskatchewan that might slow him down, he might not be on time. You should be able to kind of dissect that and provide that feedback back to the customer. Is what you're saying is the value add. Being able to be like, hey, we will provide more than just updates. We'll provide analytics of the travel for you, and this is the plan behind it.
Yeah, like analytics, or at least at the like let's start talking about the information when there's a real opportunity to react. Because if you're finding out, like for example, being informed technically before it was late versus being informed when you can still make action is very different. Like those are two very different situations to be in when you're then supporting. Because you got to remember, everyone shipping something is managing one of their customers. Like, you know what I mean? So there's a big difference in opportunity in terms of what you can do by when right? And if you translate that, like that's one thing on bulk transport. I mean, it's a little bit easier. But, to your point about the fact about the provider and what they know and what they know is set up within their network, like if I'm shipping LTL and you're my provider, well, I know what LTL is about. I know I'm not getting a dedicated service per se. I know I'm getting my freight mixed with other things. Like, so you've made some other arrangements, the carrier's made some other arrangements or whatever. So I don't need to necessarily be stressing out that thing looks like it's not moving if that was 100% your plan. What I want to know, though, is you were like, hey, this sitting here now for 6 hours was not part of the plan. Like, there's a bit of an issue here, and here's what's going on right now. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, that's a very, very different kind of approach.
And I think funny that you say that. I keep saying this, but that's what the Amazon's missing as well in there when they're letting the customer know. When you see it stuck somewhere and you're going, Is that part of the plan, or is my product missing? Do I need to reorder it, or do I need to cancel? Like, what am I doing? And you sit there and you watch it for like 2 days. You're like, oh, it's supposed to arrive yesterday. Is it lost now? Like, what am I doing? And I think that value that you touched upon there, I think is fantastic. It goes across from the warehouse all the way up to the final mile delivery that people are looking for. Is not necessarily that you have to be there, just knowing what you should be doing next. I want to know the data so I know what to do and how to react next. Without knowing, being stuck in limbo is like the worst feeling in the world. Like,
Oh yeah.
what do I do now? Do I reorder the product? What do I tell my customer? Like, what do I do at this level, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I could probably talk forever on that one, because I still could, like that's one of those moments where it's like I saw all the tech that the carrier had. Like, they were a massive well-known carrier, and I'm like in their hub, and I'm like serving this up on a silver platter, practically like telling them how to code it even, and they're like, yeah, nah, we're not going to do that. I'm like, I'm paying you millions of dollars a year already, and you're telling me no for something that, to me, looking around the room, doesn't feel that challenging. So I think that that's what I'm saying. You know, when their value is really about how do you intentionally approach your customers on problems that matter to them. Because I think the days of, hey, we're so and so, fit into my box, and just be thankful that you can see our logo for quote unquote the reliability, I think those days are over.
And I think we'll close off on those final thoughts because we're already 10 minutes over. We usually end at 8. I think it's a great topic. Final words, as always, to you as we close it off.
No, I have no final words. Busy week this week, and hopefully a lot of good stuff going on. I think it's still going to be interesting with some of the news that's coming out, like you said, about the markets, and then I'm looking forward to the Pitney Bowes stuff midweek or whenever it is. So going to be watching that. And other than that, I'm just running around the city with doing meetings and meeting with people and stuff like that. What do you have on deck, and how you starting the week and finishing this?
This week is going to be a busy week. I'm going to play a little bit of catch up. I had a few days that I was off in Chicago and Milwaukee last week, so I got to catch up on a whole bunch of stuff. Next week I am in Toronto, so we're alternating weeks, I guess. John, whoever wants to reach out and chat with me while we're in Toronto, more than happy to have those conversations. I also wanted to touch upon, when is our June the 22nd? We haven't announced it yet, but with Jessica, like I said, we're doing our regular monthly podcast. Yes, August 22nd. Did I say June?
You did, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm stuck in time. August 22nd, we're doing our regular one. We're doing back to school, more fourth quarter. We're having a great conversation on that. Would love to see everybody out there joining us on that conversation. And I think on that note, we'll say goodbye, and we'll hope to see you next week.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Crush Monday.
Bye.